Flosstube. My name is Mary and I'm the X-Ray X-Stitcher. Today I am filming a little extra for y'all. I have had several requests to show how I dye my fabric. So today that's what we're going to do. I have a crazy kitten that's running around kind of hitting the tripod. So if he moves it, sorry. This is the best setup I could come up with. I kind of played around with everything I had, so hopefully you guys will be able to see okay. This is my first time filming anything like this, so it might be a little bumpy, but we'll do our best. It is a snowy, cloudy day. I have a little bit of glare on my table, but I think we're going to be okay. So to just preface this, I've had a lot of people really enjoy fabrics that I dye, so I thought I would show how I do it, but this is in absolutely no way a tutorial. This is literally just how I do it. It's my sense of color, so don't take this as a tutorial. So first off, I'm going to show you the supplies I have. I'm kind of going to be off to the side and kind of put stuff into view. So when you use fabric dye, you really want to not use things that you're going to put in your mouth. So I always use disposable. It's not always the best option. I try to be more eco-friendly. But for something like this, I have to throw things away. So I have just some plastic cups. And then I'm going to use a Sharpie to write on my cups to know what color it is. Sometimes I will try to use color-coded cups, but these, I just have them all the same color this time. And then I have an old baby spoon that I would never use for actually eating. This just stays with my dyeing stuff. And then I have rubber gloves so I don't dye my fingers because it totally would. I have manky old towels to put my fabric on when they're to dry. Paper towels on a paper plate because I'm going to test my colors on this. Okay, Brucey's put away. Sorry, I know he howled there. I hope he didn't set all your dogs off. He's in the bedroom with Stevie, so he should be quite content now. So next up, and probably the most important, you just kind of get everything out of the way. I use Rit dye. I have all sorts of colors. I have all the primary colors. I have neutrals. I have all sorts of things. And then I use these disposable baking tins. I don't usually throw these out afterward. I've used these several times. There's Edison. I've used these several times to dye my fabrics. I just rinse them out and they're perfectly good to use again. And then I recapped, I showed the fabrics I'm going to dye in my floss tube. But let me show you again. And I'm going to do these one at a time. Normally, I wouldn't do that. I would kind of do them all at the same time. I'd have like all 4 tins and kind of do it simultaneously. I'm not going to do that because that would be too hard to show. I think it would get too confusing. So here's our first one. I know the angle is not great, but I think it'll work well when we're actually dyeing the fabric. This is the Emerald City. It's a free pattern by Al Forrest. Look at those silks again. And I always have like all my floss like ready to go so I can help it. It helps me like decide on the colors for the fabric. And then Dracula's Confession with my crappy pictures. I'm not going to insert pictures because I want to do minimal editing. And this is all 18 count off-white Aida. Originally, I was going to do all Souls Vierlanden in a 28 count even weave, but I want to use 1 thread instead of 2. So I just went with the Aida for this one too. And then there's my floss choice. What is that? 115 variegated DMC. And then the last piece we're going to do today is Long Dog Samplers, the Pilgrim. And then my floss is some silk. Ooh, that's coming out pretty. That is the color of it. It's not as bright as it usually shows, and I'm sorry about the glare. Lighting is awkward today. Okay, so I'm going to pause you for just a second, and then I'm going to set up for my first fabric. Okay, so the first one we're going to start with is Dracula's Confession. The flosses are not showing up very true to color, but a lot of people are familiar with this piece. This one is slightly tricky because I tend to start with like a more neutral background and then have one or two kind of like odd colors that pop out. Like I use a lot of tan and dark brown, but as you can see, if I did too much of that, you wouldn't be able to see these colors as well. So I think what I've decided to do with this one is I'm going to go with like a tannish background, lighter, so these colors don't disappear, with maybe just a little bit of gray. But I'm also going to add a red, okay? So what I'm going to go do now, and I'm not going to show this, I'm just going to go wet my fabric, okay? And then I'm going to put it in my tin, and then I'll show you how I crinkle it up. Okay, so I have my tin ready. Now you can see it's all balled up, but it's wet, but not dripping wet. So I squeezed the excess water. I rinsed it under cold water, and I also have boiling water on the stove. It's really important to have the water you're going to mix your dye in boiling, or else you get like these weird dots in your fabric that doesn't mix properly. Alright, so you guys can see what I'm doing. Now I'm just going to put it in my tin. It's going to crinkle a little, sorry. Sorry, my cat's. Like, my kitten has lost his mind today. He's nuts. And he's messing with Lucy, and he's going to be sorry about that. Anyway, so I just kind of haphazardly, no rhyme or reason, just put it in the bottom of my tin. And actually, as I dye, I tend to like mess it up more. So now for my colors, like I said, I'm using Rit dye. I am going to use tan. I use a lot of tan. This is probably my go-to, like it's almost gone. And then I decided on gray. So I have a charcoal gray. And then I have a cherry red. And so I'm going to take my wheat green cups here, and I'm going to label them so we know what's in what. So I have my red, my tan, and my gray. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go over to my pot of water and put some boiling water in these. You can put really as much water as you think. I usually fill my cups approximately halfway, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay. Now be careful because these cups are going to be extremely hot. And then the last one. Alright, so now we're going to begin to mix the color. Like I said, I have no formula to this. I think Rit actually has a formula on how to get your color. I don't. I literally just dump it until I think I like it. But it is important that I do a test swatch. So there's that guy. I'm going to start with my tan, because that's going to be my main color. Give it a good shake before you use it. And I just dump some and hope for the best. And then I can adjust it. So I give it a good stir. Well, let's see how we did. Looks maybe a little dark, I have a feeling. Yeah, that's going to be darker than what I want. So I'm just going to add a little more water. That's why I like to start with my cups not very full. So it's easier to adjust. And I can always dump some out if my cup gets too full and I still am not happy with the color. I think this one's going to be good though. Give it another stir. Oops. And my table is very, very durable, just so you know. I'm not that worried about spills and stuff. Nothing's going to hurt this table. It was my husband's grandparents' table, and it has been through everything. Yes, I know I'm going to like that a lot better on the fabric. It doesn't look that much different on the camera, but it is quite a bit lighter. Okay, I'm going to clean up my floss here. I forgot to put that away. You don't want any other floss or anything near this while you're dyeing your fabric. You don't want your floss to get ruined. Okay, and now I'm going to do my gray. I have found, especially with the gray, it is really important to use really hot water. I've gotten more like speckles out of this gray than probably any of the other dye. And usually I just go with it anyway because it's a lot of work. I don't want to have to put more effort in. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of that in because a little of this tends to go a long way. Give it a stir. And then I'm just going to put a little here, and then we'll see how it looks. I like it. I'm not going to use very much of the gray. And now the red's going to be a little trickier, because I'm probably going to mix in some more color than just the red. So I have a feeling this is going to be brighter than what I'm going to want. So I'm probably going to put like a little bit of the gray in it. One had a little seal on it. I haven't used this one yet. So I'm just going to be really careful. Since I have not used this color before, I am more cautious about how I go about it because I'm not sure exactly how it's going to turn out. These other ones I have a lot of experience with. This one I don't. And this is a cherry red, so I have a feeling it's probably going to be brighter than what I'm going to want. Yeah, see, it's like a pinky red. I'm not crazy about that. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's wipe my fingers off. So I'm going to add just a little bit of gray. Make sure you always put your lids on your dye, so in case something gets knocked over, you don't have a gigantic mess on your hands. So I'm just going to add a wee bit. How much? I don't know. I just dumped it in. Give it another stir. Ooh, I think that's going to be pretty. And then if I still am not super happy with it, I might add a little bit of like a dark purple. So a lot of this is just like preference. Oh yes, that is like a dark, it looks more purple than it actually is. It's like a really dark. And then that's the color I want. I'm going to add just a little bit more water to desaturate it, just a pinch. All right. So a lot of this is just personal preference and trying things. And don't be afraid to mess things up. It's okay. You can find something to use it on, even if it's not perfect. Okay, so now, there we go. Here's my spoon. So now I'm just going to start spooning up. See, like I've gotten like little red speckles on my fabric already. It's okay. I don't mind. It's not about being perfect. So now I'm just going to start kind of pouring it. Now every fabric reacts different with dye. It looks different. I've just dyed Aida. But if you look when you're like shopping for fabrics, you can see that different types of fabric are quite different. And I am seriously just going willy-nilly. I have no rhyme or reason. I know I want it mostly tan, so I'm going to use quite a bit of tan. This part's a little flat. I'm going to smush it up a little bit. There we go. I think a little more. Make sure you get the edges. The edges are kind of easy to miss if you're just not paying attention. And I have all these fabrics dyed, or I'm sorry, cut to the size I need them. And I know this does shrink your fabric some, so just be aware of that. So when I go to start a project that has had fabric that's been dyed, I don't go by inches, I actually count. So I know if I have an 18 count fabric, when I cut it, I left myself a 3-inch margin. So I know I need to count to 18 3 times to be where I want to be. And that'll give me a margin. And it should be fairly centered. Is it always? No. Sometimes I cut wonky. Okay, I think that is it'll be enough of that. Like I said, I just did it, and just so you're aware, like the dye is gonna pool on the bottom, and before I leave it to sit for a while, I always like dump that extra out. See, we've already got some red contamination on there. Like I said, I'm fine with it. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to the gray, and I'm not gonna add a ton of this. I just wanted it to make it look a little bit more grungy. And see, even compared to like the swatches that we did, and then when you actually get it on the fabric, it looks different. It doesn't look as dark. But because I've done it a few times, I kind of have a general idea of how it's going to react on the fabric. Now my next color is going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to be a little more careful with that, with the red that we've created. Alright, let's see. I think I'm fairly happy with the amount of gray. Oh, I'm going to do a little more over here. So, because a lot of this is just personal preference and trying things. See, I'm getting quite a bit. So actually, since I have so much, I'm just going to go to my sink and dump that extra out. There we go. If you don't dump that extra out, you end up with a really muddy fabric. It's not modeled that much. It's all just kind of like this muddy mess, which I have had happen before. And I ended up using the fabric anyway, because it was still pretty. It just wasn't what I wanted. I like heavily modeled fabric. Alright, so here's our red. I'm probably going to go over those little splotches, but like I said, when I took the seal off, I think it splotched a little bit on my fabric. Let's just see what happens when we do this. So since I've never worked with this one before, I'm going to start at the edge. So in case it's horrendous, I'll be able to fix it. Oh, it's not horrendous though. It is fabulous. Sorry, there's Brucey. I usually like to put him outside when I film, but it's starting to get cold. And he doesn't have much fur. So he's in with Stevie, but... Alright, look at that. That is like exactly what I was going for. There we go. So now I'm just going to smudge things up a bit more. See, like, look, you can already see. And I actually might add just a pinch more gray. Now when it dries, it's going to look different, and you'll see that. After I dry it all out, it will look different. And I have had fabrics that were like, I was going for more of a Halloween and ended up more Easter. So that's okay, I still used it, it was still pretty. And this is my next fabric that I did, I just altered it a little bit. Alright, let's get a little bit more gray. Okay, guys. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video and set this aside. Color-wise, how it's showing up, it's deeper than it's probably showing up. I'm dripping a little. It isn't as purpley. It's more like of a deep red. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to get the next fabric pre-moistened and in the tin, and then we'll go from there. Alright, friends, I need to adjust this just a little bit. It fell when I started it, sorry. There we go. So I have everything ready to go. I have my hot water in my cups. I have my cups labeled. I have not added my new colors yet. I thought I would do that with you. For this one, I'm going to keep these far away from my dye this time. So, excuse me. We're going to do the Emerald City with my pretty Mercedes silks. Now this one again, this one again was a little tricky because you can see it has some neutrals in there that could easily blend in with a tan background like I did last time. So we're not going to do mostly tan this time. We're going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to have more gray. Sorry, I'm just moving things. I'm going to have more gray than tan this time. But for my other colors, sorry, I think I kicked the tripod. I'm going to use a Kelly green and a dark green as just little accents. I'm not going to put as much of these as I did the red in the last one. I just want to weave it. Again, I've never used these colors, so this is going to be a learning experience for me as well. So I'm giving them a good shake. Let's see, I have them labeled. My dark green is right here. This is probably going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to be really careful. Just add a wee bit. Probably more than I even wanted. And then the Kelly green goes in this cup. That one looks darker than I anticipated as well. Just do a wee bit. You can always adjust. Give them both a good stir and see what we came up with. I mean, you probably should wipe off your spoon every time in between colors. Do I do that? No, pretty much never. Okay, let's get our paper towel. Can you see anything? No, you see nothing. Okay, so let's see what the dark green looks like. Oh, that's pretty. Fairly true to color, maybe a little bit more blue in it in reality. I like that. I'm going to keep that. And let's see what this Kelly green did. Ooh, I think I'm going to like it. So oh yes, that's so pretty. It's like a shamrock green. Okay, so I'm going to keep those. And like I said before, please be very careful with these dyes. It's incredibly hot. I don't want anyone to be burned. So I'm just going to do a little wipey wipe. Got a little dye on my gloves, so I'm just going to wipe them off a little bit. You know, I spend like my entire work life in gloves, and I still half the time can't get them on right. Like I struggled to get these back on after I took them off. It's funny. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go with more of a gray for this one. Can you see? Yeah, you can see pretty well. All right, so once again, I have this wet, but not dripping wet. 1 second. You know, my cats generally pretty much leave me alone when I film. Today's not that day. Probably because I'm like doing different things and I have to be part of it. Edison, like I worked a lot this weekend. He hasn't seen me hardly at all. And so I think he needs to get in all of his mischief in today to make up for this weekend. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to do a little smudgy. The more you smudge it, bunch it up, the more like variation in modeling there'll be. And I don't mind if some of my the off-white shows through. I'm not super picky. That's kind of why I like to use off-white, because if some of it shows, it's not very stark. This is an odd-shaped fabric. It's not odd, it's just square, and it's a little harder for me to get it the way I want it. There we go. I'll probably adjust it some. Okay, so it's all smudged up. Let's get my gray. Okay, here we go. And I'm just going to start pouring just like I did last time. There wasn't much gray in the flosses. There's some blacks. There's some black, but I think it'll show up just fine. Grays and tans are almost always in my starting base for a fabric. I just like the way they look. Just gonna keep going. And then if you're doing a bunch of fabrics and your dye starts to get cool, I would put a little more hot water in there. Okay, I think I'm about done with this gray. I think I'm gonna arrange it a little differently here and just see. I think I need just maybe a little bit more in some spots, like up here. There, right here. Way up there. Okay, so now I'm gonna get my tan and just add a little bit of tan. And then we're gonna add a bit of the greens. I don't want to do too much green because there's a lot of green in the flosses, but I still want a little bit. Sorry, Bertie's barking. If you made your dogs bark, I really apologize. Oops, I almost made a gigantic mess. Wear old clothes when you do this. Just a suggestion. Oh, see, look, when you put it on the fabric, that's interesting. It's not as saturated, which I like because I don't want too much. So just so you know, see how this, it's very light and subtle, which is interesting. Like I said, sometimes even with your swatch, once you get it on the fabric, it's not exactly what you were expecting. So I would recommend starting at like the very outside of your fabric where your margin will be. So if you need to adjust it a little bit, you're able to. But for this, I'm okay, because I just want just a hint. So I'm adding more of the green than I anticipated because of the lightness of it. Okay, and then let's get our Kelly green. I suspect, actually first, I'm going to dump out some of this excess. Starting to pool on the bottom there, and I don't like that. Yeah, that's interesting. Very subtle. I like that. Alright, so let's see what this one does. I'm intrigued now. That's a little too limey for me. So I'm going to add just a little bit more of the dye. I'm not even going to swatch it. I'm just going to go in for it. Just a wee bit. How much should I add? Don't know. I don't measure. Give it a stir. And then I'm going to try again. Yeah, I like that better. And just a wee bit here or there. Now I think my next two fabrics are very similar. And since I think you guys are probably getting the idea, I'm going to try to do them at the same time. See if I can get it into frame. Because they are going to be very, very similar in the way I do them. Because they're monochromatic pieces, you have more leeway on what you can do. Okay, this one's going to be done. I got a little bit of a, it's a little splotchy right there. I'm going to add a little bit of gray right there. And then this one will be done. And then we'll do the next two at once. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to dump out my excess. And then I'm just going to set it aside. How long do I let them soak in the dye? I don't know. I really don't time it. It's after kind of all my fabrics are done, I wait a little bit and then I start rinsing them out. So I'm going to pause you here and get the next two set. Okay friends, I'm all ready to go. I have my hot water in my cups. I have my colors picked out. I have my fabric wet and in the tins. This one is all Souls Vierlanden. This one is the Pilgrim. This one probably could have used a bigger container. There's quite a bit of fabric in there. But we're going to make it work because I don't have another big tin. And that's it. Let's get going to mix our colors. So I have decided they're going to have basically the same base. So it's going to be the gray, the tan, but I'm going to add a dark brown. I use dark brown quite a bit, so I have a good gauge of what I need to do. I don't have very much water in these cups because we're not going to use very much dye for this next set. Give it a stirry stir. Probably could see none of that, sorry. But I'm going to swatch it. It's way too dark for me. See? So let's add a little more water. Here, why don't I move this so you guys can see what I'm doing. There we go. It's too dark, so I'm going to go add some more water. I'm almost out of boiling water. I think I'm going to have just enough. There we go. I think this will be good now. The dark brown does tend to be very dark. Give it a stirry stir. I'm not going to use a ton of the dark brown. It's still pretty dark, but I'm going to be okay with it. Yeah, see, I can tell, like, when it starts, it'll be good. When it starts kind of, like, starring out like that. So next, let's give eggplant. So for all Souls Vierlanden, I decided I want a wee bit of, like, dark purple. So I have, if you remember, I have, like, that dark red and black floss, the variegated DMC. So I don't have very much water in there at all. So I'm going to just do a very, very small bit. Just a wee splash. Stir it up and see what we get. I've never used this color, so I don't know what to expect. But I like it. It's almost like a mulberry. I think that'll be really pretty. The floss is awfully dark for that project, so I want to be careful about how dark I let that fabric get. Alright, and then let's do some blue. For the Pilgrim, I'm going to do the same color base of gray, tan, and dark brown with a wee bit of blue. I have the silks for you I'm using on that one. I didn't get the silks and stuff out because I have a bit of a mess. And I don't want my silk and my floss to get contaminated. But I showed it at the beginning. And then I'll show it when we're completely done. What is this? Evening Blue is what this one's called. Let's see what we get. I feel like it's not going to be like as dark as like a midnight blue. Maybe in the same color family. Oh, I think I'm going to like it. I can tell already. Oh yes, it's perfect. Like a light navy almost. I like it. Alright, so let's do this process one more time. Hopefully you're not completely bored by now. Like I said, it's nothing fancy. And I'm going to do these at the same time. Get these kind of centered so you can mostly see it. You might not be able to get the whole thing. Oh, before I do anything, like I told you before, please put your lids on. Did I do it? No. It's going to be a catastrophe. Alright, so all my lids are on. All my floss and anything I don't want ruined is away. So first I'm going to start, I think I'm going to go with the tan base. That tends to be kind of my favorite. Kind of like your tea and coffee dyed color, guys. Now because this is bigger fabric on both of these, I'm going to have to do more adjusting with my fabric. But that's okay. I said I had kind of forgotten how big that fabric was for the Pilgrim, and I started getting it in there. I'm like, yeah, I should have bought one tin, like a size bigger. We're going to go with it, because I'm sure you guys are about done watching this. Hopefully this is helpful and not horrifying to any of you. Sorry, I had a second of doubt that I hit record. Okay. So now I'm going to go on to the other side. Yep, I'm going to add a little bit more right here in the middle. Now I'm going to work on the one for the Pilgrim. kind of when I plan on doing fabric dyeing sessions, I do try to plan on things that I know are going to be similar. So I'm not mixing tons of different dye. I'm not being wasteful. I can use it for a bunch of different fabric. I tend to dye batches of at least 4. Okay, now, because this fabric's so large, I'm just going to do some adjusting. Gosh, that pan is so pretty. Alright, just reposition. And then next I'll do some gray. And just like I did, I think, with the first one, it's just going to be a little bit of gray. Not much. And just a wee bit of the dark brown. Hope you guys all had a really good Thanksgiving. We did. It was very, very small. It was just my family and my in-laws. Ate lots of food and enjoyed each other's company. It was Nathan's birthday. Can you guys even see what I'm doing? Sorry guys, I wasn't even in frame for half of that. Sorry about that. But I'm doing the exact same thing I did with the other one. Okay. Now let's see. Oh, there's kind of a big... Oh, actually, I kind of like that. Okay, I'm going to leave it. This one is definitely going to have a lot more modeling because of how bunched up it is. Okay, let's move on to gray. There's my gray. There it is. Work has been... Actually, this weekend it wasn't so bad. For those of you who don't know, I am an X-ray tech at a county hospital here in Indiana. We saw quite a bit of COVID cases, but we weren't as incredibly busy as we had been. This weekend was a little more manageable. So, continue to stay home, friends. We want to be able to give you good care for those who are sick. Okay, so let me smudge it around again. Oh my gosh, you guys, this one's going to be so pretty. I think this one's going to end up being my favorite. It is going to be really splotchy, so if you don't like your fabric super splotchy and mottled, you might not like my method. And that is okay. You're all different. Okay. Go, add more, and then I'm just going to go do the same exact thing. Sorry, I move it over, then I forget. Move it back. I kind of like my fabric to look like it's been like dragged through a bunch of mud. Like, one of my favorite fabrics I've done is the one I have for the periodic table. For those of you who have seen my Flosstube, I do that one pretty much every week. And that is just the most beautiful fabric. Okay. And then I'm going to readjust my fabric here in just a little bit. As you guys can see, sorry. My hands sometimes get in the way. Okay, so let's readjust. And then I'm going to dump out the excess in both tins. Especially with monochrome pieces, I like incredibly mottled fabric. I think it's just adds a lot to the piece. I've noticed I've been veering more toward like mono pieces and stuff. You guys have watched me much. I don't do a ton of like traditional samplers, but I have a wide variety of projects I enjoy. I don't dislike samplers, I'm not as drawn to them. I love looking at all your guys' samplers though. That is enough of that. That one's going to be a little bit more gray than tan probably, but I'm okay with that. Now I'm going to be really gentle with that dark brown. And like again, I'm just going to go kind of on the outside. I do have dark brown right now. just to make sure it's not. Alright, this is pretty dark, so I'm going to be really careful with this one. Just add a wee bit. Actually, it's not so bad. It actually looks really pretty with the gray. But since all Souls Vierlanden's already a pretty dark piece, I don't want my fabric to get too dark. So that is going to be all I do with that one. And my floss, actually for the Pilgrim, is fairly dark too. So we're going to be really careful with this one. I could have had more water and desaturate it some more, but I'm not going to. I don't want to. I think it's going to be fine. There we go. Then I'm going to reposition my fabric. Oh, I forgot to dump out the excess dye. I'll do that here in just a minute. And I'm going to reposition. Oh my gosh, this is so pretty. This corner is kind of getting neglected here, so let's make sure this gets up. There we go. Just a wee bit. Alright. So I want to do that. Now I'm going to dump out all that dye that's pooled on the bottom. There we go. And now we're going to do this one. So now we're ready for our last colors on each. Let me make sure you can see. Okay. So we're going to start over here with the Pilgrim. I have my blue that I decided to use. And now I'm just going to start pouring it over. Like I said, it's nothing fancy. If you're nervous about dyeing your own fabric, don't be. It's easy. You just can't be a perfectionist, which is hard for me, quite frankly. My cross stitching, I almost ridiculously anal about how it looks, but I try to be more flexible with other things. This blue is pretty gentle, but I kind of like it because that silk is incredibly dark purple and black. So I think this is going to be just a pretty accent. Seems like my middle is probably getting pretty saturated. So let's just adjust things a wee bit. Yeah, see, the middle of this, because I don't have a big enough tin, is just getting slightly muddy in the middle. I'm okay with that. It's not bad. It's just, once the piece is done, it really won't matter that much. It's a long dog. The piece speaks pretty well for itself, even on just white fabric. Oops, sorry. Okay, I think I'll be about done with this one. So what I'm going to do after we're done with the next piece, I am going to set these two aside and start rinsing out my others. I just rinse them in cold water until it's pretty much clear. I'm not going to film that. You guys don't want to watch me rinse fabric. And then I'm going to roll them into my manky old towels. Let them dry. And then I will iron them. And then I will come back and show how they turned out. And I'll put, like, we can put the floss back on them and see what we think. This is pretty. If I would have, I actually might start with a lighter version. Then I'm going to add a little bit of, just a little bit of black to this. So I'll have some of a lighter purple and like a slightly darker purple. Sometimes I even change direction as I go through. accent of something a little darker. A little better. So I'm going to reposition. Purple. And then I'm going to put a little more darker purple on there. Okay friends, all of the fabrics are dyed and sort of kind of ironed. It's not perfect, it's still kind of wrinkly, but after I get it dyed, it's going to get put away and then it's going to get crammed into a Q-snap and all that. So I don't take a lot of time to make sure it's perfectly ironed out until after it's complete. So let's see how things turned out. I'm going to show things one at a time. I'll show one, then pause, and then get the next one laid out so you're not watching me fumble about. So the first one I'm showing is Dracula's Confession by Lindy Stitches. It's a little bit deeper than it's showing up, but not too bad. I ended up being really happy with this one. I knew this one was going to turn out well. The red maybe could have been just a wee bit deeper, but I think if it would have gotten too much darker, the rest of the flosses would have blended in too much. So we have that one, so hold on, I'll get the next. Okay friends, here is the fabric for the Pilgrim. And here's my purpley black floss. It's showing up a little brighter than it actually is. The lighting has been rather odd today. Let's move that. I'm just going to move this around a wee bit so we can get a look at it. This is actually showing up pretty true to color. The blue is nice and subtle, kind of the way I wanted it. You can see like in the middle here, it got just like maybe a little muddy through here, but I'm okay with that. Like I said, it's a long dog, so I expect perfection anyway. So very pretty, very, very happy with this one. Okay, there's the floss. Let me get out the next one. Okay, and then here we have our fabric for the Emerald City. The greens probably aren't showing across on the camera quite as much as they do in person. This is beautiful. All the flosses are going to show up really well. My grays won't get lost, and my greens won't get lost. So this one I'm incredibly happy with. This one might be my favorite. And this is going to get started today. This is the Emerald City Owl Forest. This is from my mom. So I'd like to get that going and get it done quickly. Alright, so we have one last one. Okay, and then here's our last one. This is all Souls Vierlanden. Not gonna lie, I was a little nervous about this one when it came out. As I was like right before I rinsed it out, I'm like, that is so dark. But as it dried out, it came out perfectly. It is so pretty. There are just a couple little imperfections, and I'm going to show them to you. I'm going to move my camera, sorry. And I'm going to zoom in, okay? Because I want you to see this, so you don't make the same mistake I did. So when I added the black to that purple dye, when I untwisted the cap, I probably got a few little splatters. So I have a little one here, and then around here on the side. So you have to be really careful when you're going through your RIT dye and you're opening your dyes that you do it away from your fabric, or else it's going to splatter. I'm okay with it. It's for my husband. He'll just be so happy I did this for him. He won't care if there's a little splotch on there. There we go. It's going to be so pretty. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. A little blurry, sorry. There we go. So it turned out beautifully. So I'm going to get them all out and we'll wrap this up. So here they are all laid out, kind of together. So pretty. I'm really happy with this batch. I think you guys were a good luck charm. I really hope that this was helpful and not too cringy for any of you people who dye fabric better than I do. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them down below and tell me out of these four, which one was your favorite. Like I said, I think it's that one for me. It's kind of unique. the Emerald City one. But I think they all turned out beautifully. So I will be back, unless I get called into work, I will be back for my normal floss tube on Thursday. So we'll see if I made any progress on my Emerald City then, okay? I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.